In my previous video, we discussed a Mr. Thompson, an American consul to Meridia in Mexico, who worked for the Peabody Museum, at least in an archaeological sense, researching and controlling the archaeological digs and findings of the Mayans burial plots in the Yucatan. And he did this for over 30 years, between the years 1894 to 1926. With Mr. Thompson's resume including the Peabody Museum, I thought we would begin there. And the first article we're going to discuss goes on about the art treasures located at Yale for the Peabody Museum. The sister university for this museum is Harvard, of course. My main point is that this article confirms that the Peabody Museum is the chief repository of natural history specimens at Yale. So let me say that again. This article confirms that the Peabody Museum is the chief repository of natural history specimens for Yale. And if Harvard is the sister college, I'm assuming, or university, I'm assuming that is also the chief repository there. When I was looking up all this information, the Peabody Museum is interestingly under construction and closed right now as of April of 2023. So the Peabody Museum was started in 1866 by George Peabody, an international financier and philanthropist, of course, which is just a nice way to describe a wealthy elite. A Mr. O.C. Marsh was appointed professor of paleontology, the first in the United States at the time and second in the world, all during or at the end of the Civil War time period, 1866. So let's ponder that for just a moment. This timeline that Mr. Peabody was doing this was during the height and the tail end of the Civil War in America. So let's look at Mr. Peabody for just a moment. He was born in February of 1795 and was not only an American financier and philanthropist, but was considered the father of modern philanthropy. Now, why would they say that about him? Let's read between their lines. He moved to London in 1837, which according to Wikipedia was the capital of the world finance. Interesting. I'm sure that wouldn't have anything to do with the British monarchy, would it? How else could Mr. Peabody become the most noted American banker? So much so that he helped establish America's international credit. So in order to do that, he had to meet with either the royal family or the top of the British banking network. I mean, you can't just waltz into another country and establish an international line of credit without being notable anyway, could you? Anyway, the story goes Mr. Peabody didn't have any heirs, so he took on a partner, a Junius Spencer Morgan, in 1854. And this partnership would go on to become the global financial services firm of J.P. Morgan and Company, not surprisingly. He established the Peabody Trust in Britain in 1862, which, let me remind you, was during the Civil War in America. He also established the Peabody Institute of the Johns Hopkins University, located in Baltimore, Maryland, which is another video all on its own. He also established the George Peabody Library, also located in Baltimore. The Peabody Institute was founded in 1857, just a few years prior to the Civil War, yet didn't open until 1866, which was a few years after the Civil War. This is a very interesting timeline right here. And I'd also like to point out that this is the oldest conservatory in the United States. It is also noted that Mr. Peabody won worldwide acclaim for his philanthropy, so much so he was awarded the Congressional Gold Medal and made a Freeman of the City of London, among many other honors. So what exactly does that mean? A freeman is a benefactor of freedom of the city, which is an honor bestowed by municipality upon a valued member of the community or upon a visiting celebrity or dignitary. So who decides this, I wonder? Who determines what defines a valued member, celebrity, or dignitary? Basically, this is what we now call receiving the key to the city. This ritual arises from the medieval practice of granting certain people freedom of serfdom. So it does go back to the royal families or kings of the earth. They still practice this ritual today, although they claim that it doesn't confer special privileges. We know better, don't we? These people wouldn't be called celebrities, dignitaries, or valued members unless they receive special privileges. I mean, why else would they do it? Anyway, they also refer to this as freedom of entry. Freedom of entry, in their own words, mean the freedom to parade through the city and is an affirmation of the bond between the regiment and the citizenry. Freedom of access to the city? What exactly do you think they really mean here? It's based as a ceremonial ritual going back to ancient Rome, not surprising. But who else do we know that loves to parade through the cities? I mean, think Mardi Gras. Think along those lines. And it's really nothing new under the sun, is it? Okay, so freedom of the city. Mr. Peabody received this honor, or should I say he participated in this ritual for the city of London, yes, in Britain. Now, why do you suppose the city of London bestowed this on Mr. Peabody? Well, I guess we'll have to get into that in part 2 of this video, which we will discuss Mr. Peabody himself more in depth. So getting back on topic here, the Peabody Trust was started in 1862. And let me remind you, this is still during the American Civil War. But the Peabody Trust is now known simply as Peabody. And Peabody is one of London's oldest and largest housing associations, with about 55,000 properties across London and the southeast. Considering how old Britain is, if Peabody was the oldest, let's remember it was founded in 1862. That's really not all that old, is it? Considering, anyway. And that's in the middle of the American Civil War. Apparently, Mr. Peabody had an affection for London and bounced around many ideas to justify his funding or financing of certain charitable gifts there. He first established in 1859 a model dwellings company. And what exactly is that? That is a group of private companies in Victorian Britain that allegedly sought to improve the housing conditions of the working classes by building them new homes. Really? Why does that seem so familiar? And by March of 1862, Mr. Peabody launched the Peabody Donation Fund. The aim being, he said, quote, to ameliorate the condition of the poor and needy of this great metropolis and to promote their comfort and happiness, close quote. Okay, this American is doing this all for the city of London while the American Civil War was in full force. Does that make any sense? The Peabody Trust was later constituted by Act of Parliament stipulating its objectives to work solely within London for the relief of poverty. This is the beginning, or starting to resemble, a 15-minute city, at least in its description. The first building was opened in Spitalfields in 1864. It contained 57 dwellings for the poor, which includes 9 shops with accommodations for shopkeepers, baths and laundry facilities on the upper floor, with water closets grouped in pairs by the staircases. By 1882, the trust housed more than 14,600 in 3,500 dwellings. In its early days, the trust imposed strict rules to include rent paid weekly, a curfew, and the dwellings could not be used for certain trades. So let's conclude here with regards to the trust. In 2014, Galleons, Trust, Thamesmead, and Tilfin Land became part of the Peabody Group and now comprises Peabody and Galleons. In 2017, Peabody merged with Family Mosaic, still using the Peabody name. And in 2022, Catalyst Housing became part of the Peabody Trust. This will now include responsibility of over 100,000 homes across London and other counties.